Hi, it's Dennis Daly. It's been pointed out to me that I filed a lot of reports on YouTube that have to do with travel and maps. Well, the two go together, and recently I found a report I did about maps and why I like them so much. I don't know why I started liking maps so much. I know it was likely when I was in early grade school and my parents took me, sometimes twice a year, by car to visit family in Washington, D.C. Back then, the drive from southwestern Indiana to D.C. was 2.5 days, and that meant a lot of map reading. I let all my aunts and uncles know how much I love maps, and soon they started bringing me maps from their travels. This was in the age when gas stations gave away maps for free. By the time I was in 8th grade, I had nearly 1,000 highway maps. I carried my love of maps with me through high school, especially when I was able to go on trips driving by myself. Then in college, I discovered geological survey maps. These maps cover the entire U.S. It takes an astounding 57,000 of them to cover the lower 48 states. They are so detailed, they not only show elevations, they show highways and roads and outbuildings and natural features and power lines. Within this circle, note the rings around the south slope of Mount Ethel. Each ring is 10 feet lower or higher than the next. The altitude is shown in what looks like bathtub rings. Look at these rings, and then compare them with these. The second set shows a much steeper slope because the rings are closer together. In this circle, you can see black dots along the state highway. These are buildings, and if you look at this area, you'll see a creek coursing through a canyon formed by two hills. It's very obvious. When I was working on Capitol Hill, I was able to order the complete set of these maps to take me from my apartment in Washington to my parents' home in Indiana. About 125 maps in all. Because they were so big, I had to put them in a binder, and they took up almost all of the passenger seat of the car. I've always thought AAA had the best maps, and as I'm getting older, I understand why. They're the most readable. Today's maps are a far cry from the kind my aunts and uncles gave me in the 50s, but compared to maps of previous centuries, which were largely only one or two color, they're a miracle. In the early days of the automobile, maps became more accurate but more basic. Look at this one from a section of the old Lincoln Highway in Ohio. By the 1950s, maps were sometimes three-color affairs, but by comparison with today's beautiful maps, the maps of my childhood were dull and hard to read. Here's a section of an early Wyoming map. It's stark and all too basic. But it's sad, with the rise of GPS, hardly anyone uses a map anymore. But for my money, a map is 1,000 times more useful than a GPS. And that's an entire nother report. For a moment, though, let's look at a modern-day highway map and point out some of the things you might have never noticed. If we zoom in on my hometown of Washington, Indiana, it's a small place, but it's kind of a microcosm of what I'm trying to show you. You will notice from the east there are two U.S. highways sharing the same right-of-way, and they suddenly meet outside of town, the brand-new I-69. Crossing that, the road continues west but becomes 4-lane. Notice also this star. That means that Washington is the county seat, and even though it's a small town, it has a bus line, and on the northeast side of town, a small commercial airport. The blue line shows an east-west railroad, and there's a north-south railroad coming through the area, and to the west, the meandering trace of the White River. All here on the map. Also, notice one other thing, and that's the fact that at the bottom right, there's a green area. That's a state park and a Glendale Recreational Area Preserve. Now, if you just used your GPS, would you have noticed all of that when you drove through town? I don't think so. Here's an example. Many years ago, a woman went out the old highway, old US 50, headed to the west. She was going to go all the way to Vincennes, but she didn't notice something. The GPS said go straight ahead. Well, that was a mistake. Right there was a sign that told her to turn left, go south, and catch the new road down there. But it was dark and rainy, and she went straight ahead at a rather high rate of speed. And if we zoom in on that area, we'll notice something. The bridge over the White River isn't there anymore. The GPS hadn't been updated, or it might have known that. So maps or GPS or charts or whatever, I love them all. And one other thing, maps are the only thing I know that can predict the future. Some thoughts on maps and why they are still important. I'm Dennis Davis.